Will the young blood play in the basement, or are they too scared to go down there alone? I would be very afraid if I were them. A family who just bought their dream home started receiving sinister letters from someone who called themselves the Watcher, someone who kept a close eye on the couple and their children, watching their every move. Let's dive into this case in story form. Derek and Maria Broaddus seemed to have a picture-perfect life. They had 3 young children, 2 daughters and 1 son, and they had just bought their dream home in Westfield, New Jersey, 657 Boulevard. It had 6 bedrooms and 4 bathrooms, 3,800 square feet in all, and it cost them $1.3 million to get it. Derek had grown up in Maine, climbing the ladder of success where he eventually became senior vice president at a New York insurance company just before he turned 40. Maria had grown up in Westfield, blocks from their dream home. She was a stay-at-home mom. When they laid eyes on the house, they immediately fell in love. With multiple fireplaces, the children debated which fireplace Santa Claus would use at Christmas, where they'd leave the cookies and milk. They imagined building a perfect life together in that home, or so they thought. One cool summer night in June 2014, just 3 days after closing on the house, Derek was at 657 Boulevard, finishing up painting a few spots in the living room. Maria and the kids were still at the old house, which hadn't sold yet. He wanted everything to be perfect when they moved in. Derek wiped the paint off his fingers using a dirty cloth that already had crusted paint on it. He went downstairs to the basement to put the cans of paint away, and then he came back upstairs to get the tarp lying on the floor. He quickly folded it up, knowing he'd be back the next day, and threw it down the stairs. He went out to the front of the house to check for mail. Their gold mailbox had a few things in it. The bills had already started pouring in. He quickly glanced at them when a crisp white envelope caught his eye. To the new owners, it read in clunky, messy handwriting. Derek thought nothing of it, so he opened the envelope. Inside was a typed note dated June 4th, which was days before the sale on the house was made public. That's odd, Derek thought.
Allow me to welcome you to the neighborhood.
Derek, thinking it was a friendly letter from a neighbor, continued to read.
How did you end up here? Did 657 Boulevard call you with its force within? This house has been the subject of my family for decades now. It's approaching its 110th birthday, but I'm sure you didn't know that. My grandfather watched it in the 1920s, and my father watched it in the 1960s. It's now my time. I've been put in charge of watching and waiting for its second coming. Do you know the history of the house? Do you know what lies within the walls of 657 Boulevard? Why are you here? No matter. I will find out.
Derek felt uneasy, and the more he read, the more disturbed he felt. The sender noted that they had a minivan, and noted the work that Derek and Maria had been putting into the house. But he kept reading. He couldn't pull his eyes away from the letter.
I see you're already flooding 657 Boulevard with contractors to destroy the house. Tisk, tisk, tisk. Bad move. You don't want to make 657 Boulevard angry.
The next part made Derek's blood run ice cold. His hands began to shake with fear.
You have children. I've counted 3 so far. Do you need to fill the house with young blood as I have requested? Better for me if you do. Was your old house too small, or was it greed that brought your children to me? Once I know their names, I will call on them and lure them to me.
Derek turned the envelope over to look for a return address, but there was none. He read further.
Who am I? Hundreds of cars drive by 657 Boulevard every single day. Maybe I am in one of them. Look out the many windows in the home and you will see all the people that stroll by every single day. Maybe I am one of them. I had asked the woods to bring me young blood, and it looks like they listened. Welcome, friends, welcome. Let the party begin. Signed, The Watcher.
Derek stood in front of the house alone. His eyes darted back and forth down the street. Was this a joke? It was getting dark outside, so he ran back inside the house and went from window to window, making sure each of them were locked. He pulled each nightlight from the outlets and even turned off a lamp that he kept turned on, letting others know that this house was occupied. Then he picked up his phone from the kitchen counter and called the Westfield Police Department. I need help. I just received a threatening letter. Can you please send someone down to 657 Boulevard? When an officer showed up and read the letter, he too was in shock. He went outside and searched the perimeter of the house and came back inside. I think you need to remove some of that equipment from the back porch. Whoever sent you this letter could easily pick something up and toss it through your window. Derek ran to the back porch and with the officer's help, brought the construction equipment inside. Do you have any enemies? The officer asked. Not that I know of. We haven't even moved in yet. The officer told Derek to look out for anything suspicious. When the officer left, Derek made sure everything was locked up and then he rushed back to the old house that was on the other side of Westfield. That evening, Derek was quiet. He didn't say a word about the letter to his wife Maria until their children had gone to bed. Honey, I think you should see this. Derek pulled out the letter from his back pocket and handed it to Maria, and immediately she became worried. She read the letter. What sicko would send something like this? She then emailed the previous owners, Andrea and John Woods, who had sold the house to them. In the email, she asked if they knew about the Watcher and why the Watcher was saying the Woods had brought young blood to them in the letter. Both Derek and Maria paced back and forth inside their home that night, one they'd be leaving soon, anxiously waiting for a response. But it didn't come. The next morning, after a sleepless night, Maria checked her email, and there was Andrea's response, so she quickly opened it. I'm sorry for your concern. Now that you mention it, we did receive a letter from someone that called themselves the Watcher days before moving out, but to be honest, we didn't give it much thought. It was weird, sure, and the Watcher mentioned watching the house, but in the 23 years we've been living in that house, we didn't receive anything like that before, so we threw it out thinking it was a scam. Maria replied to the email asking the Woods if they'd be willing to go to the police station with her to file a complaint, and they agreed. That day, when the three of them got to the police station, they met with Detective Leonard Lugo. They explained to him what happened, and he advised Maria to not say a word to anyone about the letters. This included her neighbors, who were now suspects. Maria felt a lump in her throat, but she agreed. She could feel the fear rising in her chest. Anyone she and her family had come into contact with was now a suspect. Maria went home and told Derek what the detective had advised them to do. As the days went by, Derek's paranoia grew. They were still in the middle of moving their things to the new house. Whenever they brought the kids to 657 Boulevard, Maria yelled at them to stay close, fearing that someone could be watching them. One day, Derek was showing his renovations he'd made to a young couple that lived a few blocks over. They'd exchanged hellos in passing, and they seemed nice enough. He took the couple to the back of the house, but the words that came out of the wife's mouth made Derek panic. Ugh, it'll be so nice to have young blood in the neighborhood. Derek quickly ended the conversation and told the couple that he had a lot to do, that he needed to see to it. With a curt goodbye, Derek went back inside the house and locked the door behind him. This can't be happening, he thought. They still hadn't moved in. His breathing grew faster. He peered through the window to watch the couple leave, noting any strange behavior, but they seemed fine. 2 weeks went by, and both Maria and Derek let their guards down. It was only one letter, and nothing strange had happened since. Maria was driving back to the old house after grocery shopping when she decided to stop at 657 Boulevard. Derek had asked her to look at some paint samples. They were both undecided on what color to paint the kitchen. She walked over to the mailbox and froze. A crisp, white envelope was peeking out of it. Maria slowly pulled out the envelope, hoping it was something else, but she immediately recognized the clunky handwriting. Then she opened it. Addressing both Derek and Maria as Mr. and Mrs. Broaddus, their last name was spelled incorrectly, implying that whoever was sending the letters was in earshot of hearing it. Maria felt terror flowing through her body, but she read it.
Welcome to your new home. I see the workers are busy. I've been watching you carefully unload your personal belongings. Have you found what's in the walls yet? I'm pleased to know your names and the names of the young blood you have brought to me. You certainly say their names quite a bit. Your daughter, is she the artist in the family?
Maria peered over the letter and looked at the enclosed porch, where her daughter had put an easel. The porch was surrounded by brush, and unless you were close to the house, you'd have no idea it was there. This made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. She sensed someone was watching her right then and there, but she continued to read.
It's been years since the young blood ruled the hallways of 657 Boulevard. Say, will the young blood play in the basement, or are they too afraid to play down there alone? I would be very afraid if I were them. The basement is very far from the rest of the house. If you were upstairs, you would never hear them screaming.
Maria could hear and feel her heartbeat as if it was going to burst out of her chest. She ran to the back of the house looking at her surroundings, at other houses. Her head was spinning, but she kept reading.
Will you sleep on the second floor? Who will have the bedrooms facing the street? No matter. I will know as soon as you move in. Then I can plan better.
When Maria got to the end of the letter, she scanned the street, gripping the letter tightly.
I pass many times a day. Who am I? I am the Watcher, and I've been in charge of 657 Boulevard for 2 decades now. The Woods turned it over to you. It was their time to move on. 657 Boulevard is my life. It's my obsession. Now you, the Braddis family, are one too. Welcome to the product of your greed. The families that lived there before you came to me the same way. Happy move-in day. I will be watching.
At this point, Derek and Maria stopped bringing their kids to the house. It was unsafe. Westfield was supposed to be an idyllic neighborhood, a place where families left their doors unlocked. Nothing bad was supposed to happen there. It was even named the country's 30th safest town to live in. But the Braddis family felt anything but safe. They were on the verge of not even moving in. Several weeks had gone by without any of them visiting the new home. And finally, when Derek decided to check up on the new house, a letter was there waiting for him.
Where have you gone? 657 Boulevard is missing you. You can't keep it waiting.
Derek and Maria were distraught. This was their living nightmare. One day, Derek was outside talking to a neighbor that lived 2 doors down. The neighbor told him about an odd family that lived in between them, the Langfords. Peggy Langford was in her 90s, and most of her children that were in their 60s lived with her. Michael, who was the youngest son, was a recluse, and he didn't work. To Derek, this was the answer he'd been searching for. Everything added up. The family had been there since the 60s, and the Watcher said his father was observing the house. Well, Richard Langford passed away 12 years ago, and the Watcher did say he'd been watching the house for 2 decades now. Derek and Maria went to the detective with this information, but the detective told them that without any evidence, they couldn't do much. Hearing this, Derek was filled with anger. My kids' safety is on the line, and they're telling me they can't do anything? He told his wife that he'd take matters into his own hands, that he had to. If the cops weren't going to be involved, then they'd have a very different case on their hands. Derek threatened violence against anyone that terrorized his family. As the days passed, Derek was consumed with protecting his family. He bought webcams. He set them up all around the house, pointing them in every direction. Then he'd spend night after night watching each one sitting alone in the dark. He created a timeline of when his neighbors moved into the neighborhood. He even drew a circle on a map of the neighborhood, indicating the range of earshot to see who could have heard them yelling their children's name. But Derek didn't stop there. He even hired a private investigator to stalk the neighborhood. Derek asked him to run a background check on the Langfords, but it came back clean. Annoyed that this didn't go anywhere, he turned to an acquaintance, a woman he knew from the board of trustees at the high school, which he was also on. She was a former FBI agent and the inspiration for Clarice in Silence of the Lambs. Unsatisfied with the amount of help, Derek contacted another former FBI agent, Robert Lenahan. One afternoon, the two sat down together to examine the letters. You know, there's several old-fashioned ticks everywhere in these letters. Well, what do you mean? Derek asked. For one, the way it's addressed to you. M-M, it's an acronym for Mr. and Mrs. It's an old way to address someone. And look here. Lenahan pointed to the part of the letter that talked about the weather. Warm and humid, sunny and cool, it's old-fashioned. The guy has a way with words, and maybe he's seen The Watcher. You know that movie with the serial killer that stalks the detective that's trying to catch him? There were typos and errors showing that the letters were written with passion. Lenahan picked one up, which read,
The house is crying from all the pain it's going through. I ran from room to room, imagining life with its rich occupants. The house was full of young blood, and now I wait for when the day the young blood will be mine again.
Lenahan recommended looking into housekeepers or their descendants. Maybe they were tied to this somehow. But Derek and Maria kept their focus on the Langfords. When Detective Lugo brought Michael in for a second interview, nothing came from it. Michael's sister even got angry and accused the police of harassing their family. Days went by. While they slept, Derek and Maria started to have vivid nightmares of someone hurting their children. They couldn't escape their fears even while they were sleeping. They grew suspicious of everyone. They learned from the private investigator that there were 2 offenders that lived a few blocks from 657 Boulevard. They learned from their painter that a couple that lived behind the house faced their lawn chairs towards their house. By December 14, the investigation went nowhere. Derek and Maria became worried that maybe this was just a haunting of some sort. They called a priest, and that very day he came to bless the house. New alarms went in, but they weren't any closer to moving in. They had to sell their old house, so they moved in with Maria's parents, still terrified of 657 Boulevard. They decided to put the house up for sale, and bids came in, but way below asking price. Both Derek and Maria found themselves becoming angry towards the previous owners, the Woods. Anger fueling their decision, a year after they bought the house, they filed a lawsuit against the Woods. A week went by after that, and Derek decided to drive past the house. He noticed news trucks and reporters parked right outside. He quickly drove past them, ducking low, trying to stay out of sight, and went back to Maria's parents' house distraught. Little did he know that the local paper had picked up the legal complaint, and the story about the house went viral. "We need to get away from here. We can't risk the kids knowing what's going on," Derek told Maria. So the family packed up and left Westfield to stay at a friend's beach house. But life brought them back. When the family returned, Maria noticed that the neighbors looked at her and her family with a strange look on their faces. Come to find out, the whole neighborhood was on edge. She heard through a neighbor that some were even calling them wimps for not moving into the new house. One afternoon, Derek was in the middle of work when he received a phone call from Detective Lugo. "Michael Langford is not a suspect anymore, Derek. Look, he was diagnosed with schizophrenia when he was a young man. Yeah, he spooks some neighbors, but he's a kind man. You need to let it go. He's not our guy." Detective Lugo paused. "There's something else you should know. We ran a DNA analysis on the letters, and the DNA belongs to a woman." Derek already had another suspect in mind. "Well, what about Michael's sister? She's a real estate agent. She'd know a lot about this house." The police did test Michael's sister's DNA, but it was not a match. The next day, Maria was at the grocery store when she heard whispers coming from the aisle next to hers. "You know, I wouldn't be surprised if they were sending letters to themselves," one woman said. "I know, I think they have buyer's remorse. Do you know how much that house is worth? Their old house cost them $300,000. How can they afford this one?" Maria was disheartened, but that quickly changed to anger. When she got home, she told Derek what she heard. "People can't bear to think that something like this would happen here, Derek. Did you know? A few years after I was born, a man killed his wife right here in Westfield. My parents always told me to look out for a strange man. Bad things happen everywhere." While Maria and Derek were consumed with fear, their neighbors were consumed with their house's property values and the stigma. 2 years had gone by living in fear, and Derek had enough. He woke up one morning and told Maria that they needed to buy a different house, that they couldn't live like this, and Maria agreed. They asked family members if they could borrow money to buy a second home in Westfield. Sensing their desperation, the family members gave them the money, and so they bought a second home and moved into it. Maria received an email one day from a young family that was interested in renting 657 Boulevard. When she showed Derek the email, they both jumped on it. There was a clause in the rental agreement that if the watcher contacted the young family, that they would be out. But Derek and Maria didn't care. 2 weeks later, the husband renting 657 Boulevard called Derek to deal with the squirrels on the roof. When Derek arrived at the house and got out of his car, the husband approached him and handed Derek a letter. 2.5 years had gone by since they received the first one. It read,
"To the vile, spiteful Derek and his wench of a wife, Maria.
This letter was different. It reeked of anger.
I watched you as you watched me from inside that house. Binoculars and telescopes, what wonderful inventions. 657 Boulevard survived all your attempted assaults. Revenge will come. Maybe a car accident, maybe a fire, or perhaps something as simple as a mild illness that never goes away. Loved ones suddenly die, planes, cars, bicycles crash, bones break."
Derek's worst nightmare had become a reality. The watcher was threatening death. He apologized to the spooked husband and told him that he'd be back to deal with the roof. He excused himself and rushed back home. He called the police on the drive home, letting them know about this particular letter that was seething with anger, but nothing came of it. In 2019, the lawsuit against the Woods was dropped and time went on. They had new renters. Later that year in December, several families started to receive letters just like the Watcher was sending out, but the letters were in defense of the Broaddus family. When Detective Lugo went to Derek to ask, Derek confessed that he was the one writing letters, that he was just tired of having a bad name. The last letter Derek and Maria received from the Watcher read,
"You are despised by the house, and I, the Watcher, have won."
In 2019, Maria and Derek finally sold the house to a family that wished to stay anonymous, and the Watcher's identity was never discovered. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up or maybe even subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.